It is late, the room is quiet, and your mind decides now is the perfect time to replay something you said days ago. Maybe it was a strange joke, an awkward answer, or one sentence you wish to take back. You remember the other person's expression. You remember your words. Then your brain edits the scene, replays it, changes what you could have said, and runs the conversation again. You know it is over, yet it feels unfinished. Most people assume this happens because they are overthinking, but that explanation misses something important. If your brain wanted to punish you with embarrassing memories, why return to those moments when you are still? Sometimes the conversation was not important. You could spend the day forgetting it, only for the memory to appear when everything becomes quiet. Your mind seems to choose silence to reopen the file. So what if those midnight replays are not random and not a sign something is wrong? What if your brain is trying to solve a problem that has nothing to do with changing the past? Maybe you notice it after an argument, when you suddenly remember the exact sentence you should have said. Or after meeting someone new, when your mind analyzes every pause, expression, and awkward moment. Sometimes the replay involves something embarrassing from years ago. Other times, it is a conversation from yesterday that seemed completely ordinary until your head became quiet. The details return, and suddenly you are examining them like evidence. I'm Peak, and this is where the mystery becomes more interesting. Because remembering an event is not necessarily the same thing as replaying it. Your mind can revisit an experience while searching for something it believes remains unresolved. That might explain why the same conversation can return repeatedly, even when you consciously want to forget it. But what determines which moments receive this strange attention, and why does nighttime seem to make the pattern stronger? To understand that, we need to look beyond your own bedroom and into a documented psychological experience that reveals what can happen when the mind cannot easily let an unfinished experience go. Imagine university students meeting strangers for the first time. Nothing dramatic happens. They talk, answer questions, share pieces of themselves, and eventually the interaction ends. Yet for some people, the conversation does not really end there. Researchers Todd Kashdan and John Roberts studied this kind of social experience with unacquainted college students. Participants took part in structured conversations resembling ordinary interaction, including personal disclosure and simpler small talk. Afterward, researchers examined what happened emotionally. The important part was not simply whether participants remembered the conversation, it was what happened afterward. People with higher social anxiety were more likely to engage in negative post-event rumination, repeatedly focusing on what the interaction might have meant. They could wonder how they appeared, whether something had gone wrong, or whether another person had judged them negatively. The conversation had ended externally, but internally, their minds continued treating it as something requiring attention. That distinction matters because the mind can turn a finished event into an unfinished mental task. A conversation ends externally, while internally, someone may keep searching for mistakes, signs of rejection, or clues about how others perceived them. Another study by Julie Morgan and Robin Banerjee examined how negative feedback and thinking styles affected autobiographical memories after social experiences. Participants encountered social situations and later recalled personal memories. The researchers then examined the emotional qualities of those memories. Among participants with higher social anxiety, a ruminative thinking style was associated with recalling memories carrying higher anxiety ratings. The finding suggests that how people process an interaction afterward can influence which memories become emotionally significant. Think about what that means in ordinary life. You might leave a conversation thinking everything was fine. Hours later, lying in bed, one expression suddenly feels suspicious. Then another sentence becomes important, and your mind starts examining the moment again. You replay the scene, reinterpret what happened, and search for information that seemed invisible earlier. The researchers were not showing that everyone who replays conversations has social anxiety. That conclusion would go far beyond their evidence. Instead, the findings reveal something subtler. What happens after an event can shape how memories are experienced and interpreted. So tonight, when your mind returns to that conversation, ask something different. What is it trying to figure out? Because sometimes, The mind does not replay an experience because the past matters more than the present. It replays the experience because uncertainty still feels unresolved inside the present moment. What you are experiencing has a name that helps explain why the same conversation can return long after it ended. Researchers describe this repetitive review after social situations as post-event processing, especially when an interaction felt uncertain or emotionally important. It is not simply remembering. Memory gives you the event, while post-event processing involves examining what happened, how you performed, what another person might have thought, and what you could have done differently afterward too. Imagine leaving an interview and remembering one answer that sounded weaker than intended. You reconstruct the interview, imagine the interviewer's reaction, and mentally rewrite your response. The event stays the same, but your interpretation keeps changing afterward, internally. Something similar can happen after an argument. You remember a facial expression, then a sentence, then the silence afterward. Each detail seems to offer another clue. Your mind is evaluating what the conversation means to you personally. Research involving socially anxious participants has found links between negative post-event processing, self-focused attention, and more negative interpretations of social experiences. Importantly, replaying conversations repeatedly does not automatically mean you have social anxiety alone. The deeper point is that attention changes what becomes psychologically important. When you repeatedly inspect an experience, certain details receive more mental weight. A tiny awkward moment can begin feeling larger because your mind keeps returning to it again. Nighttime can make this process especially noticeable. During the day, conversations, notifications, responsibilities, and other thoughts compete for attention. When those distractions fade, unfinished mental review can become much easier to notice, especially in silence. But there is another layer. Your mind may not be searching only for mistakes. It may be trying to reduce uncertainty, protect your social identity, prepare for future situations, or make sense of an emotion more clearly enough. The first reason is uncertainty. A conversation can replay because your mind never received a satisfying answer about what happened. Did they understand you? Did they dislike what you said? Was that silence meaningful? When the answer feels unclear, reviewing the event can seem useful. Your mind searches the memory for evidence, almost like reopening a message thread and looking for a detail you missed. The problem is that memory rarely provides certainty. That is why a pause can become fascinating at midnight. You remember the person becoming quiet, then wonder whether you offended them. You replay your sentence, their expression, and the silence afterward, hoping another interpretation will settle everything. Yet every new interpretation can create another question, keeping the conversation mentally active. The second reason is emotional processing. A conversation can return because it carried an emotion that never received your full attention. Embarrassment, disappointment, anger, or rejection can linger. Imagine receiving criticism from someone you respect. You nod, continue your day, and tell yourself it was fine. Hours later, the conversation returns. You may be trying to understand why it affected you so strongly. This is where replaying can become misleading. The mind may keep examining the event while actually circling the emotion underneath it. Instead of asking, what exactly did they mean? The deeper question might be, why did this make me feel exposed? That question moves the replay from the conversation toward the emotion. The third reason reaches even deeper. Some conversations become connected to your sense of self. Social interactions provide information about how you believe you are perceived, valued, respected, accepted, or understood. Suppose you make a mistake while speaking in front of classmates. The mistake itself may be tiny, but your mind connects it to a larger concern. Do people think I am incompetent? Suddenly, replaying the moment feels important because your identity seems involved. You are no longer reviewing one sentence. You are evaluating what that moment might say about you. This is why certain conversations return while countless others disappear. Moments that touch uncertainty, emotion, or self-perception can receive far more mental attention than conversations carrying little personal meaning. And now the part becomes clearer. The replay may feel like your brain is stuck in the past, but it can be oriented toward the future. Your mind may be asking what this experience means. what it predicts, and how you should respond next time. But if the replay feels useful, why can it continue when nothing new is being discovered? The loop often begins with a trigger. Maybe the lights go off, your phone becomes silent, and nothing demands your attention. A conversation that felt insignificant earlier suddenly returns. Then comes the thought. You remember one sentence, one expression, or one unanswered reaction. Because the moment contains uncertainty, your attention moves toward it, searching for an explanation. That search creates an emotional response. You might feel embarrassment, tension, irritation, regret, or a need to know what the other person meant. The emotion makes the memory important. Then something subtle happens. Replaying can create a temporary sense of control. For a moment, you feel as though you are doing something about the situation by analyzing it. That temporary feeling can reinforce the habit. Your mind learns that when discomfort appears, reviewing the conversation is one available response. The next time emotion arrives, the pathway becomes easier. Eventually, the pattern can become automatic. A quiet bedroom becomes associated with reflection. Reflection becomes associated with a memory. The memory produces uncertainty, and uncertainty invites another round. This does not mean your brain consciously decides to torment you with old conversations. Learned patterns can operate without deliberate choice. Once a response becomes familiar, the trigger can go unnoticed. Because you are trying to reach certainty, every interpretation can generate another possibility. Maybe they were annoyed. Maybe they were distracted. Maybe you misunderstood. Maybe you should have explained differently. Instead of closing the question, analysis creates more questions. Telling yourself to stop thinking often fails. The original uncertainty remains unresolved. The goal is to recognize the loop earlier, understand what keeps feeding it, and create a different response when the same trigger appears. Once you see the pattern as a learned cycle rather than a command, you gain room to interrupt the cycle. The first step is noticing the moment the replay begins. Instead of immediately entering the conversation again, pause and name what is happening. I am reviewing that interaction because something about it still feels unresolved. That simple recognition creates distance between you and the thought. You are no longer automatically following the memory wherever it goes. You are observing the pattern before it becomes another long mental investigation. Next, identify what the replay is actually trying to solve. Is it uncertainty about what someone meant? Is it embarrassment? Is it fear of being judged? Or are you trying to prepare yourself for something similar? Once you identify the underlying concern, respond to that concern directly. If certainty is impossible, remind yourself that replaying the conversation cannot manufacture information that was never available in the first place. If the problem is an emotion, acknowledge it without turning the memory into a courtroom. You can recognize that something embarrassed, disappointed, or unsettled you without needing to reconstruct every second of what happened. Another useful approach is deliberate attention shifting. After noticing the loop, move your attention towards something concrete in the present, such as your breathing, the sounds around you, or a simple task requiring focused attention. This is not about forcing the memory away. Suppression can sometimes make unwanted thoughts more noticeable. Instead, you are practicing the ability to notice the thought without automatically rewarding it with another investigation. With repetition, this creates a different response pattern. The goal is not to guarantee that old conversations never appear again. It is to become less compelled to follow them every time they appear. And if these thoughts become extremely distressing, interfere with sleep, or feel difficult to control, talking with a qualified mental health professional can provide more individualized guidance. You cannot control every memory your mind produces, but you can gradually change what happens after the memory arrives. And that is where the loop begins to lose its power. Maybe tonight, when a conversation returns, you will see it differently. Not as proof that you are broken or incapable of letting go, but as evidence that your mind is trying to make sense of something. Sometimes the replay is about uncertainty. Sometimes it is emotion. Sometimes it touches the question of how you believe other people see you. And sometimes it is simply a familiar pattern easier to repeat than interrupt. Picture your mind like a room where an old conversation sits on a table. You keep picking up the file, searching through it for an answer. Eventually, you realize the answer is not hidden inside another replay. The next time you find yourself lying awake, reconstructing every word, pause before entering the scene again. Ask yourself what you are looking for. That question may tell you more than another hour of analysis could. If this happens to you, tell me in the comments. What kind of conversation does your mind replay most often? And what do you usually feel while replaying it? If this video helped you understand your own mind differently, like it and share it with someone who constantly replays conversations. If you want more discoveries about the hidden psychology behind human behavior, subscribe to Peak Psychology. I'm Peak, and there is always another layer beneath what seems ordinary. Remember, sometimes thoughts that keep returning are not asking you to revisit the past. They are asking you to understand what the past still means to you.